Kunja Vihari Jaya Rama Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Rama Madhava Kunja Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, continuing. 9th Canto, Chapter 1. King Sujumna becomes a woman. And on the board is text number 40.
Yes.
Acharya
Acharya
Anugrahat
Anugraha
Kamam
Kamam
Labdra
Latva
Pumstvam
Pumstvam
Yavasthaya
Yavasaya
Palayam
Ayam
Asha
Asha
Jagatim
Jagatim
Nabhyanandan Sma Tam Praja Acharyanugrahat Kamam Labdva Pumsatvam Labda Pumstvam Vyavastaya Palayam Asha Jagatim Nabhyanandam Smatam Praja Acharyanugrahat Tamam Labdva Pumstvam Vyavastaya Palayam Asha Jagatim Nabhyanandam Smatam Praja Acharyanugrahat Kamam Labdva Pumstvam Vyavastaya Palayam Asha Jagatim
Alayam Asya Jagatim
Nabhyanandam Smatam Praja
Nabhyanandam Smatam Praja Acharyanugrahat Kamam
Acharyanugrahat Kamam
Labdva Pumstvam Vyavasthaya
Labdha Pumstvam Vyavastaya
Palayamasa Jagatim
Palayam Asya Jagatim
Nabhyanandam Smatam Praja
Nabhyanandam Smatam Praja
Acharyanugrahat Kamam
Acharyanugrahat Kamam
Latva Pumstam Vyavastayam
Labdha Pumstvam Vyavastaya
Palayamasa Jagatim
Palayamasa Jagatim
Nabhyananda Smatam Praja
Nabhyanandam Smatam Praja.
Did you try?
Acharyanugrahat Kamam Labdva Pumstam Vyavastaya Palayamasa Jagatim Nabhyanandam Smatam Praja.
One more.
Acharyanugrahat Kamam Labdva Pumstam Vyavastaya Palayamasa Jagatim
master.
by the mercy of the spiritual master.
Kamam,
Kama,
desire.
desire.
Labdva,
Labdva,
having achieved.
having achieved.
Pumsam,
Pumsam,
maleness.
maleness.
Becoming a male. Vyavastaya,
Devasaya,
by this settlement of Lord Shiva,
by this settlement of Lord Shiva,
Alayam,
Alayam,
Asha,
Asha,
he ruled.
he ruled.
Jagatim,
Jagatim,
the whole world.
the whole world.
Na,
Na,
Abhyanandan,
Agnideva,
Sma,
Ma,
we're not satisfied with.
We're
not
not
satisfied
satisfied.
with.
Come
Tam,
to the king,
To the king,
Praja,
Raja,
the citizens.
the citizens.
I'll read the previous verse too. O King Parikshit, Lord Shiva was pleased with Vashishta, and therefore to satisfy him and to keep his own word to Parvati, Lord Shiva said to that saintly person, your disciple Sujumna may remain a male for 1 month and a female for the next month. In this way, he may rule the world as he likes. Thus, being favored by the spiritual master, and according to the words of Lord Shiva, King Shudumna regained his desired maleness every alternate month. Amazing, huh? And in this way he ruled the kingdom, although the citizens were not satisfied with this. Purport. The citizens could understand that the king was transformed into a female every alternate month. Therefore, he could not discharge his royal duties, and consequently, they were not very satisfied. There's one more verse, 2 more verses I'll read, and that's the end of this chapter. So the next one you'll begin a new chapter. It says, O king, this is, what's his name speaking? Shukadeva Goswami speaking to Maharaj Parikshit. He says, O king, Sujumna had 3 very pious sons, named Utkala, Gaya, and Bimala, who became the kings of the Dakshinapatha. But in the synonyms to this, Prabhupada translated this Dakshinapatha as the southern part of the world. Remember, this is they were ruling the world at that time. Manu's son, King Shudumna, was the emperor of the whole world. And here he had 3 sons, Utkala, Gaya, and Bimala, and they became kings in the southern part of the world. Thereafter, when the time was ripe, when Sujumna, the king of the world, was sufficiently old, he delivered the entire kingdom to his son Pururava, and then entered the forest. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to the Vedic system, one within the institution of Varna and Ashrama must leave his family life after he reaches 50 years of age. It is stated, Panchasad Urdhvam Banam Braje. He has to go to the forest. That's the Vedic injunction. So thus, Sujumna followed the prescribed regulations of Varnashram by leaving the kingdom and going to the forest to complete his spiritual life. Thus ends Bhaktivedanta purports of the 9th canto, 1st chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled King Sujumna Becomes a Woman. Bhagavatam is so amazing. To back up a little bit, King Sujumna he was actually born first as a woman. This gets confusing. He was born as Ila to Shraddhadev, Shraddhadev Manu. Yeah. Yes. He was born, yes, as a woman, Ila. But Manu was having this sacrifice performed so he could have a son. And in those days, this is another age, it's not Kali Yuga. I believe it's Satya Yuga. He instructed the priests. Well, first he told his guru, Vashishta. Vashishta was the guru of all the many demigods and so on. Very powerful person. He wants a son. So he arranged for the fire sacrifice, and he told the priest, the king wants a son. But before the sacrifice was begun, the wife of what's his name? Shraddhadev, the king, went to the priest and said, I want a daughter. Even though he was ordered by his guru to do the sacrifice for getting a son, when the wife of the king spoke to him and said, I want a daughter, as he was doing the yajna, when it came to the part of chanting the mantra, he immediately remembered what the queen had said. He remembered what the queen's desire was. And as a result, a daughter was born. So Manu was very happy he didn't have any children. So he wanted, he's ruling the world. He wanted an offspring, especially he wanted a son. But he was happy nonetheless that at least he got an offspring, he got a girl. So he named her Ila. But after some time, he kept thinking, I really wanted a son. So he went to the guru and he said, what happened? You remember I told you I wanted a son? He said, yes, I remember, and I instructed the priest. So what went wrong? So Vashishta, hearing of these words from Manu, he could understand that the discrepancy was on the part of the priest who was performing the yajna. And then he spoke to Manu. At this time, Manu was also the sun god. He was ruling the sun planet. It was a long time ago. So he says, Vashishta says, it was the priest, it was his mistake. However, by my spiritual powers, I'll give you a good son. And he after he made this decision, he offered prayers to Lord Vishnu, Vashishta, and he was able to transform the girl into a man, the woman into a man. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the controller, being pleased with Vashishta, the spiritual master, gave him the benediction that he desired. And thus, Ila, that's the girl who came out as a result of the sacrifice, she was transformed into a very fine male named Haribo. Hey, welcome. Named Sujumna. So, Sujumna, one day, accompanied by a few ministers and associates, went out hunting. He was riding a horse and he went into the forest. Previously, the Kshatriyas used to do that. They were allowed to hunt to keep their fighting skills sharp. But they went with bows and arrows, and, not guns. Anyway, he was wearing armor, decorated with bows and arrows, and he was a very beautiful man. While following where the animals were and killing some of them, he ended up reaching the northern part of the forest. And there in the north, at the bottom of Mount Meru, there's a forest known as Sukumra, or Sukumara, where Lord Shiva always enjoys with Uma, the goddess. And so Sujumna, who was expert in subduing enemies, entered that forest with his men. But when he entered the forest, he saw suddenly himself, his body was transformed into a woman. Yeah, just by going into the forest.
Shiva?
But it's a special forest. It's where Lord Shiva hangs out with his wife, the goddess Uma. But there's a reason for this. So as the king, he looked, he saw that I'm a woman now. And his horse was transformed into a mare. A mare is what, like a mule?
Female horse.
A female horse.
Ah, jument.
They call them mares, eh? When his followers, the king's followers, saw all of them, all of their identities were transformed, their sex was reversed to women, they became very morose. And they just looked at one another. You can imagine, it's a bewildering experience. So Parikshit Maharaj, he's here in this narration by Sukadeva Goswami. So he becomes excited. He says, what made this place like that? So powerful that his king and his men all turned into women as soon as they went in? kindly answer my question. I am eager to know about this. So Sukadeva Goswami replied, formerly, great saintly persons who strictly observed the spiritual rules and regulations and whose own effulgence dissipated all the darkness in all directions, came to that forest to see Lord Shiva. They knew he was in that forest, Sukumara forest. But as they entered in the forest and they came in the presence of Lord Shiva, the goddess Ambika is another name, saw the saintly persons, and she became very much ashamed because at that time she was naked. This is a goddess, Lord Shiva's wife, At that time she was naked. So she immediately got up from the lap of her husband and tried to cover her breasts. So, seeing Lord Shiva and Parvati engage in sexual affairs, all the great saintly persons stopped and they desisted from going any further. They in the forest, they suddenly come upon, and this is what's happening. So they turned around and said, we're not going any further. And they went back out. And instead they went to the ashram of Narayan Rishi. This is incarnation. Narayan. Then, just to please his wife, Parvati or Ambika, she has different names.
Uma.
Lord Shiva said to her, any male who enters this forest from now on shall immediately become a female. So it was Lord Shiva who put that, you can call it a curse, whatever. He put and since that time, no male had entered that forest. They heard, don't go there, unless you want to become a woman. Don't go there. But after some time, King Sudyumna, he goes with his men, and they all became women. So as this happened, King Sudyumna, she's now a queen, having been transformed into a female, began to walk with his associates from one forest to another. There's a nice purport Prabhupada it gives here. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, in the second chapter, Vasamsi jirnani yata vihaya navani grinati naroparani tata sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. Means, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. It's Krishna's statement. So Prabhupada says, this body is just like a dress, and here it is proved. Sudyumna and his associates were all male, which means that their souls were covered by male dresses. The body is like a dress. But now they became female, which means that their dress was changed. They changed bodies, they changed dress. However, the soul remains the same. It is said that by modern medical treatment today, a male can be transformed into a female. and a female into a male. Right?
Mhm.
They call it transgenders.
Mhm.
A new thing. Yeah.
New hobby.
Yeah. Just changing clothes, changing dress. You know? Prabhupada said, however, the body has no connection with the soul. We have no connection with this body. Because the soul is spiritual and the body is matter. But under the spell of Maya, three modes of material nature, we think we are these clothes. We think, it's just like if you walk around thinking, I'm a red shirt, and I think I'm a blue shirt.
I don't like red shirt.
See? You can go home and change. So, Bhagavatam is showing by this pastime how easy it was. They changed their body. Because the body has no connection with the soul. The body can be changed either in this life or the next life. Therefore, one who has knowledge of the soul and how the soul transmigrates from one body to another does not pay attention to the body. He's not concerned with it, with the bodily dress. Because it is nothing but a covering of the soul, the person. In Bhagavad Gita it is also said, Pandita Samadarshana. Such a person who has knowledge sees the soul, which is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore he is considered learned. He doesn't see the body. Now, we're living in Kali Yuga, where 99.9% of the people don't understand this. They think we are this body. And they're fighting on the basis of the body. I remember when I was young in Trinidad, which is a little island, we would hear on the news about Russia. There was like a Cold War going on between Russia and America for years. And you know, those were the days when they had spies. America would have their spies going to Russia, sneaking and trying to find out what they're up to. And the Russians would send their spies to America to find out what the Americans are up to. And at one time, I remember clearly, it was during the presidency of Kennedy. Kennedy was a famous president in America. And during his time, the Russians were sending a ship full of weapons to Cuba because Cuba had become communist. So Russians were communists, Cuba has become communist, so they become like the allies, so they were sending weapons. And of course the Americans found out about it. So what did Kennedy do? He ordered 2 big warships which were stationed in the islands, the Caribbean. That's where Trinidad is, the Caribbean. And he called them and had them go and face that ship traveling with weapons. It was going to Cuba. Cuba is also in that area. And he told, they told them, loudspeakers, turn around and go back. You cannot, you're not allowed to come here. You cannot bring these, we know what you're doing. And for a few days, the Russian ship refused to go, refused to turn around. The Americans were blocking their path. And so everyone in the islands, we all thought World War III is going to happen. Because if the Americans bomb that ship, it's going to piss off Russia. And that'll be the start of a war. So we were all, I was a boy, I wasn't like afraid or anything about it. It just sounded exciting. You know? Like something exciting is going to happen. But actually it was very serious. Eventually the Russians backed down and they turned around and went back. I was famous. It was on all the news everywhere. You know? And everyone, the world was watching, thinking, it's going to be World War III. But it was stopped in time. So, but anyway, most of the world today, they're in the bodily concept of life. They're thinking, I'm American, I am Russian, I am Frenchman, I'm this, I'm an Indian, I'm an islander, right? We all have this ahankara, it's called. Ahankara means, we read this morning, false ego. Ego means this sense of identity. I am. What are you? If you ask anybody, they will answer, I am. They won't say I am this body, but they'll answer you in terms of the body. I am American, I'm Indian. Everyone. And here comes Prabhupada. And he's telling everybody, no, you're wrong. You're not this body. But he's speaking something on the basis of Vedic wisdom. He's speaking on the basis of Bhagavad Gita. He didn't make it up. But as you began to chant Hare Krishna, you can understand. It makes sense. It makes sense. You're not this body. If you are this body, then what is your future?
Earth.
Yeah. The material future is always dark.
Like nothing.
Yeah. But the spiritual future is always bright. So, when I first met the devotees and they told me that it was a new thing to hear that you're not this body. And the thing is, we see it happening all around us. People are dying, and families, parents, friends, and nobody knows what happens to them, where they go, But they're different from the body. So when I first heard the devotees say this, that we're not the body, I remembered an experience that I had when my father died. My father died, I was only 14 years old. So at 14, you don't know anything. pretty much. You don't know much about life and you don't know much about death. Because they don't teach you that. But I remember clearly going to the church, because we were raised as Catholics, Roman Catholics. Went to the church and they brought, the coffin was already in the church, in the aisle, close to the altar. And the people came and filled, the church was filled with people. But they told the close relatives, you know, like children and so on, and family members, to sit up close, up front. So I was sitting there and the coffin was right there in the aisle. And I remember the priest was giving a sermon. They have a special ceremony, a mass for the dead that they do. And then it comes to a part where he stops the ceremony and he speaks, gives a sermon. He reads a passage from the Bible and he begins to, give a purport. So the priest began to say, to tell everyone, we have gathered here today to honor the passing of James. That was the name of my father. And he said, and then he continued to speak. Every few sentences he would say, so James is no longer with us. James is departed. James is gone. James has left the building. He kept talking like that. And I'm sitting there, while he's talking like that, I'm young, you know. It just kind of hit me for a few more moments. Well, if James is no longer with us, he's not here, then who's that and what's that? The body was there. The body had all the parts, everything, but he's dead. What is the difference between a dead body and a living body? Life is gone. The life force. That's who we are. We are the life force. But no one thinks about it. Even the priest was saying he's gone and so on. And then when the ceremony was over, we go to the cemetery where they put the body in the ground. And everybody, just for a few minutes, some people cry, and then they go back home and bring out the booze.
What is the booze?
Alcohol. Yeah. Everyone meets back at the house, and there's bottles of rum to drink. Get a taxi, and they forget all about it. They go about business as usual. Forget about it. But so I said I had no knowledge, they never teach anything. But when I meet the devotees, and they start to explain to me some of Bhagavad Gita, my mind went back to that. I began to think, yes, that's what happened. He was no longer there. He's gone. We don't know where he's gone, but he's gone. I could have gone up to him and slapped his face, but he wouldn't protest because he's not there. Similarly, when in India, when they burn the bodies. Sometimes Americans, when they hear about that, they think, oh, that sounds so horrible. They're burning the bodies. My mother told me this actually. She said, they burn the bodies? I said, Ma, Nobody is in that body. They're not there. And I explained to her. Eventually, guess what? My mother, before she died, she decided, I want to be cremated. And it's not common for Catholics to get cremated. But that was her wish. So we executed her wish. But people don't know anything. But just by coming in here in Srimad Bhagavatam every day, you hear so many wonderful things that's possible. And Bhagavatam there's no book like it. It said you could burn all the other books, and if you have Srimad Bhagavatam, there's no loss. You're not missing anything. Because all knowledge is in Bhagavatam. And because it was the time when Sudumna, we first read, he was not happy being a woman. The citizens weren't happy. You know, they want to be ruled by a king. This is, in those days, they want monarchy, you know, they thought of like that. So his guru, on his behalf, performed a sacrifice and worshiped Lord Shiva. Asked him if he could do something. Because Lord Shiva he's a big personality. So Lord Shiva, he said, what did it say? Lord Shiva, being pleased with the sacrifice offered by Vasishta Muni, he's a sage, a saintly person. Lord Shiva thought, I have to satisfy him, but I also have to keep my word to my wife, Parvati. So he is the one that made the forest have that effect. If anybody, because they were disturbed, you know, they were having their intimacy, and suddenly these saintly persons walked in on them. So Parvati was embarrassed, ashamed. So Lord Shiva, to make sure this doesn't happen again, he made the forest, he put a curse, I guess, on the forest. That any man will come in there again, from this day on, they'll turn into a woman. And then many years passed, and this king, coming in there, they were all transformed into women. So when the guru, Vasishta, prayed to Lord Shiva, he came up with a solution that the king will remain a male for 1 month, and the next month he'll be a woman. And this will go on until he dies. He'll just be alternating. What a life! 1 month he's a male and a female the next month. And this way he ruled the world. But his citizens were not satisfied. They weren't happy with that. They thought he cannot discharge his duties, his royal duties, properly. So they weren't satisfied. But the king Sudumna, he had sons. And kingdoms to rule, and when the time was right, it means when he reached 50 years, because that's the Vedic injunction, according to Varnashram. It's supposed to, even the kings would leave home. They'd walk away from the kingdom.
Go in Varnashram,
Yeah.
Varnapasta.
Yeah. You know, that's what they would do. So before going, he handed over the entire kingdom, which was actually the world, to his son Pururava. And he entered the forest. That's what they would do, go to the forest and try to perfect their spiritual life, to meditate. You know? There's many stories you'll hear of persons going to the forest. This was common. Nowadays, nobody does that.
There is no forest anymore.
You know? We read Dhruva Maharaj, and Dhruva Maharaj was just a boy, 5 years old, and he was a prince. He wanted to sit on the lap of his father, and his stepmother, because the kings would have more than one wife. So the latest wife was his favorite, popular. And she stopped Dhruva. She said, "You cannot go and sit on the king's lap. You want to sit on the king's lap, you have to die and take birth in my womb. Then you can sit there." And the father didn't do anything, he didn't say anything. So Dhruva was so upset, he stormed out of the palace. And he went to his mother and told her what happened. And she says, "I can't do nothing. I am not his favorite anymore." "What shall I do?" She says, "Only God can help you. Only God can help you. This is beyond my powers." So he said, "Where will I find God?" And she said, "In the forest. That's where all the saintly persons go." So it was common. And he went there and started fasting, doing yoga, meditating. And Narad Muni came by. He said, "What are you doing here? You're a little boy. Go back home." He didn't talk to me. If you can help me, you can speak. If you're not going to help me, I don't want to hear you. So Narad Muni says, "Boy, you're really determined." So he said, "What do you want?" He said, I want to see God." And I was told, my mother said, "This is where you can find God, in the forest." They say the country is made by God and the city is made by man. So people go to the forest. And he did it. Narad Muni gave him a mantra, the mantra that we chant before Bhagavatam, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narad said, "Just chant this mantra. You will see God." So he was there in the forest, living on leaves and berries, whatever he could find, and meditating and chanting this mantra. And after 6 months, Vishnu appeared to him. So, of course, these things we'll read about, they don't happen now, but, you know, those kind of yajnas, sacrifices, it's forbidden. Nobody can do that. There's no qualified brahmanas to perform such sacrifices. So it's forbidden. But by the appearance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he has given us the Mahamantra, the greatest mantra. You chant this mantra, you'll achieve perfection. So that is the sacrifice for this age, to chant congregationally. When many people get together and chant, that is called Sankirtan. Means that is complete kirtan. Not alone, but with others. The yoga system, those you have to do alone. And in previous age, that's what people, they'd go alone into the forest. Not in group. But we cannot do that now, but we could be in group and chant. And the more, the merrier. We can have a good time. Right? Jai. Hare Krishna. So you're feeling better?
Yes. Completely cured.
Hmm?
Completely better.
Completely cured, good.
Like a young man. Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhu.
Very good.
Very good.